This is a Pulp archive recording. All public Pulp archive recordings are licensed under Creative Commons. For more information or to support us, please visit patreon.com/pulparchive. This episode was prepared by Soul and narrated by Edward, the digital narrator. Phantom Billiards by Frank E. Walker. Weird Tales. February 1926. This episode contains period-typical depictions of crime, violence, and mild profanity. Listener discretion is advised. The older of the two raised a thin finger to point at Lord Aleys, and there came rattling from his muzzled throat words that made the statesman shiver violently. Like wildfire, the news spread throughout the village of Sussex. From the time the postman rode through early in the afternoon until the lamps were lighted in the cottages at dusk, it was on every tongue. A new master and mistress were coming to live in Hadley Hall. Old women shivered at the thought, and old men gloomily shook their heads. Outside the little vine-covered cottage of Giles the woodchopper, young Hal Wilkerson had stopped to exchange a cheery word with the wise old fellow. Their small talk soon turned to the coming of new tenants to Hadley. "'Tis a sad thing, old Giles muttered, his eyes dim with memories. "I am told they are but newly wed. A happy man and his young bride, a sad thing. But why?" young Hal queried. "You know I am but lately come to Sussex. Tell me why it is so sad a thing that these folk should come to live in Hadley. 'Tis a fair enough estate, and the hall is a stately pile. Yet I have heard strange tales about it. Tell me what makes the place so terrible." "Aye, that I will," the old man answered with a dull gleam in his eye. "That I will, for it will serve to keep you away from it, who are young and happy and like to live many a year. Sit you down here and give me ear." When Hal had seated himself on the bench, the old man told him the story of Hadley Hall. "I was nigh a score years ago that it happened. The thing that has made Hadley a place to be shunned when there is no moon, or the clouds hide her face. Before that unlucky day, Sir Michael and his brother, the brave young Bertram, had always been as faithful and true to each other as brothers could ever be. Unmarried they were, and they had lived there ever since the death of their mother, the gentle Blanche, 8 years before. In France, they had been until news reached them that their father, fiery old Sir William, had fallen in a quarrel with swords between himself and his enemy, Robert of Henstown. Then they had returned to keep their mother in her old age. Her passing came in peace, as I have said, 8 years after. It was a woman who came between them, none other than the daughter of Robert of Henstown, he who had slain their father. Sybil, she was called, and a woman to truly delight the eye. Sir Michael, being older and of sterner stuff than Bertram, frowned on his attentions to Sybil, saying that as the daughter of their father's enemy, she was to be avoided. But Bertram vowed that his father had fallen in honourable dispute, and that they had no further quarrel with the house of Henstown, seeing that its head was also gone, leaving no one with whom to continue the enmity. For could one wage war on women, than whom there was none left of the line? These arguments did not serve to soften Sir Michael's heart, so that at last, when Bertram avowed his intention of taking the lovely Sybil to wife, there arose harsh words between them. The whole thing was told by their old serving-man, Rollo, who later died a madman, with the memory of it. They were great admirers of the game of billiards, at which they were wont to play for hours at a time, and often until late at night. Passers-by on the high road, a scant score rods from the hall, often heard the click of the balls and their shouts over a good play. It was after they had finished a game one night, and Sir Michael had retired to his bedroom to shave himself, that Bertram chose to tell him of his approaching marriage to the Lady Sybil. Sir Michael stood before a glass, carefully running the razor over his lean face, as Bertram sat himself in a chair not far off. "Brother," he said, I have news for you which mayhap will not please you." Sir Michael was a man of keen mind. "Then I would say that it concerned Sybil of Hensdown, since there is no other thing upon which you could talk to me in a manner displeasing," he said quickly. "In sooth, that is so," Bertram replied. "We are to be wed this very month, the day and the hour already being decided upon." At this point, Sir Michael ceased his shaving, though he did not lay aside the razor, and crossed over to stand at Bertram's side. "Bertram," he said in great wrath, "if you wed this wench of Hensdown, I shall disclaim you as brother of mine. Moreover, I shall do everything in my power to prevent your committing so mad a deed." "That I swear by the memory of our mother, who would have forbidden it with her last breath." "Hold your words, Sir Michael," Bertram shouted, leaping from his chair. "No man shall name Sybil thus and fail to answer to me for it. I demand that you unsay those words, else you may never be able to prevent our marriage." Sir Michael turned away with a laugh to resume his shaving, but Bertram turned him about by the shoulder and faced him closely. "Unsay them, I tell you," he demanded again. "I will not," Sir Michael declared. Then Bertram smote him across the cheek with a staggering blow. It was more than Sir Michael could stand. Even from his brother having in his veins blood that was hot, and in his nature a temper that flared up quickly, though it as quickly died away. In a trice he had struck back at Bertram, but alas, he had not laid aside the razor, and an unkindly fate caused its blade to sweep fair across his brother's neck. Bertram staggered back, grasping his neck, the blood spurting through his fingers in a gory flood. Once he moaned, then fell on the carpet. "Oh, God!" Sir Michael cried in horror. "I would not have done it. I swear I would not have done it." In vain were his efforts to staunch the flow. There on the carpet, young Bertram coughed out his life, through the gaping wound in his neck, and all the cries and pleas and efforts of his brother could not bring it back. It is said that, to this very day, that awful stain still dyes the carpet where he lay. Sir Michael could not tear himself away from the corpse of his brother. For hours he sat on the floor, moaning and tearing his hair, fast losing his grasp of himself. In the end, as the early hours of morning came on, he went stark, staring mad, and slashed his own throat with the same razor, and thus died. They were buried side by side in the ground of the chapel, where their mother and father were wont to worship. The lovely Sybil quitted England and was never again heard from, though some said she went into a French convent. So the old hall became dark and silent, and when villagers belated in their homeward journeys chanced to pass on the high road, they quickened their steps and did not look upon its gloomy shape. Exactly. A year later, to the very night on which the awful deaths came about, a villager named Wesley, the same who is now Clerk of Suzy, happened on the high road, being on his way from Minstead. Drawing nigh the hall, he halted in astonishment to see that it was lighted on the ground floor. Listening sharply, he was further astounded to hear, sounding clear and sharp on the night air, the click of the balls with which the game of billiards is played. Now the good Wesley was of stouter heart than most, and being always eager to find a reasonable answer to any question, he made bold to enter the grounds and approach a window which was lower than the rest, letting out upon a terrace. The sight that smote his eyes from within the room forever after cured him of window spying. Over the billiard table, in the centre of the large room, the swinging candelabrum shed a fitful light. Yet the flames from the wicks of the tallow dips did not seem to burn, rather glowed with a flickering cold light that was at once weird and unearthly. At one side of the table, with his stick in hand, stood young Bertram Hadley, watching with great concern the play which Sir Michael Hadley, on the other side, was about to make. And across the throat of each gaped a horrible wound, like a grinning red mouth, while their jackets were gory with their own lifeblood. Stiffened with horror at the spectacle, Wesley stood watching, powerless to depart. For upwards of an hour they played thus, now commending each other at some skilful deed, then arguing with all the fervour of their hot natures. At last, when Wesley was trembling with fright and weakness, they laid their sticks on the table and walked from the room arm in arm. As they departed, the cold light from the candles dimmed and then vanished, and Wesley stood in darkness. When he had gained strength enough, he fled to the village, chattering with fear, his eyes wide and staring. Hours passed before he could tell what he had seen, and from that day to this, he has never been as stout of heart as before. Now you know why I say it is a sad thing for these folk so happily wed to come to that place. It is scarce a fortnight now until the brothers Hadley are like to return for the yearly game at billiards. When they do come, woe be unto him who liveth within the walls of Hadley Hall. Just 3 days later, the newly wed couple arrived, together with a goodly staff of servants. In less than 3 hours after they had first set foot in the hall, the entire village knew that they were Lord Aleys and his lady, the comely Helen. Lord Aleys' name was well and widely known in that day, for as a member of Parliament, his statesmanship had been felt the length and breadth of England, and as a warrior and sportsman, he was no less celebrated. The memory of his conduct, when for 3 days and nights he was cut off from his countrymen and besieged by the enemy atop a barren hill, still remained fresh in the minds of those who were with him and lived to tell the tale. For his exploits in the war, he had been granted the Victoria Cross and other decorations. Yet of his trophies of the hunt, captured in many foreign climes, he was even more proud. Now, while still a young man, having not long before passed his 35th birthday, he had taken a wife and a noble estate, so that there seemed nothing more needed to make him the happiest man on earth. He was very nearly that, for life at Hadley Hall promised to be a perfect idyll of love, blessed contentment. Months would pass by before he would be called back to London to plunge once more into affairs of state, and the intervening time he planned to spend in quietude with his bride. Yet he had hardly become settled in the hall when on the 3rd day since their arrival, as he was walking in the gardens where workmen were busy restoring their former beauty, he was startled by the sudden appearance from the hedge at his side of the villager, Hal Wilkerson. Bumbling his cap in his hands, Hal approached him, timidly and uncertainly. I... Your pardon, sir, for coming this way and startling you. There is something I should tell you, and I was afraid I might not get to see you. I understand, said Lord Aleys in his kindliest manner, and he had a way of making everyone feel at ease in his presence. You are from Sersey, I presume? Aye, sir. I be called Hal Wilkerson. I see. And what is it you feel you should tell me? Well, you see, sir, it has to do with the hall. It's... Yes, go on, don't be afraid to tell me. Well, sir, it's haunted. Lord Aleys took on his gravest and most interested attitude. I am glad to hear that, for I shall be forearmed, he said. You are quite sure, I suppose, that it is haunted? I know that for a fact, sir, Hal assured him. It's commonly known here in Sussex. Everyone fears for you and your lady, sir, and we hope you will not try to stay. Please believe me, sir, I wouldn't lie to you. On my soul, I wouldn't. Lord Aleys spent a moment apparently in deep thought. Haunted, he said meditatively. Well, well, that's unfortunate. But I hardly see how it can be helped now, for I've bought the hall, you see, and I'd hate to lose the money. It cost me a tidy sum. Aye, sir, I've no doubt it did, Hal agreed solemnly. But is it not better to go with your lives than without them? This question piqued his lordship, for he raised his brows and regarded the villagers solemnly. Do you mean to say our lives are in danger? He asked sharply. Aye, sir. And I fear the time is not far off either. Suppose you tell me just how and why this place is haunted, if you know, Lord Aleys suggested. Hal complied, and they walked to a stone bench nearby, where Lord Aleys took a seat, but the villager remained standing, still fumbling his cap and looking still less at ease. It was a nervous business for him, for never before in his life had he addressed such a high and great man. Still, the courage that caused him to lurk for 2 hours in the hedge, waiting for a chance to speak, carried him through so that he told the story of the two brothers and of the yearly billiard game with fair clarity. When he had finished, Lord Aleys sat silent for a few minutes. Then his face became wreathed with a jolly smile that ended in a hearty laugh. "I have just thought of something very amusing," he explained to Hal, who marveled that he could laugh after what he had told him. "You see, I had the hall done over before I came out," he continued, "and the old billiard table went out with a lot of other rubbish, too worn to be a service. Now, what do you suppose the amiable brothers will do for a table to play on when they come for their game, as you say they will, in a short time?" "I don't know, sir," the villager replied in all sincerity, "but I think they will find a way to amuse themselves. You'll pardon me for saying it, sir, but I should not wish to be here when they do come." With that, he made a clumsy bow and walked away to disappear through the hedge, pulling his cap on as he went. Lord Aleys sat thinking for some minutes before he arose and went toward the hall. Strangely enough, when Lord Aleys related Hal's story to Lady Helen, she was not inclined to treat it as lightly as he had done. She listened gravely while he told it, in a merry humor at the dinner table that night, and when he had concluded, she sat staring into space without making any answer. Seeing that he twitted her, saying, "Come now, sweetest, you aren't going to let this silly village myth disturb you, I hope?" To which she answered, with a queerly mysterious smile and a pat of her hand on his arm, "Alan, I do not consider it altogether a myth. Much of it is history, as you may be surprised to learn. As for their coming back, are you sure they will not be angry at your having removed the billiard table?" Lord Aleys stepped behind her chair and, leaning over, embraced her. "Surely you jest," he said lightly. "Do you think a couple of staggering old phantoms can harm me when bullets and tigers have done their worst and come off second best?" And he laughed cheerily while she continued to stare into space. Come the night when, according to the story, the brothers were to return for their phantom game of billiards, and Lord Aleys had quite forgotten the matter. But not so Lady Helen, who was visibly nervous and worried, though her husband did not notice it. After they had both retired, she sat for a long time in a chair by the wide window of her bedroom, looking out upon the quiet countryside which was swimming in the silver light of the moon, riding high overhead. She could not sleep. In her heart, a nameless fear tugged and strained, and her mind could not throw off the dread picture her husband's story had penciled there. Lord Aleys proceeded straight to bed, and did not find sleep tardy in possessing his mind and body. In fact, so soundly did he slumber that he was not conscious of any time having passed before he was awakened in an inexplicable manner and sat upright in bed, feeling queerer than he had ever felt before in his whole life. In his brain there still echoed a call from somewhere, a call that had come in a strange, rattling voice. It was both a call and a protest against something. He knew that it concerned him, though his name had not been uttered. Strange thoughts began to run riot through his brain, and these thoughts, try as he might, he could not banish. In his mental agony, a cold sweat popped out on his brow, and his tongue clave to his mouth, so that he could not cry out. Then he saw, and at the same time knew, as if it had stepped out of darkness into light. There appeared in the room, not far from his bed, the figure of a man attired in the costume of many years before. There was about him an indefinable air of unreality. He did not seem materially solid, more as though a great cloud of steam had been pressed and molded to the shape of a man. Yet that was not what actually struck terror to the bold heart of Lord Aleys. The man's throat had been slashed from ear to ear, and his blood dyed the front of his jacket in hideous splotches. As though the appearance of this dread apparition were not horror enough, there came into evidence at his side another figure, that of a younger man, and his throat, too, was slit, and the wound gaped open so that it grinned ghoulishly at the fear-paralyzed man in the bed. The older of the two raised a thin finger to point at Lord Aleys, and there came rattling from his mutilated throat words that made the statesman shiver violently. "Intruder, encroacher on our happiness, why have you done this thing?" he asked. "What thing? What have I done?" Lord Aleys queried in the thin voice of an old man. "Why have you removed the only source of happiness we possessed? Why had you, who could ask nothing more of life, to destroy the only joy that remained to two souls, deriving nothing but pain and misery from death? Through every hour of the year save one, we wander through an eternity of sorrow and anguish, myself condemned to such, my brother choosing to suffer with me. Now that 1 hour you have taken away from us, no more may we come here at this time to find respite from our woes. Therefore it is but justice that you, who have destroyed our pleasure, shall join us to taste our pain. You know the manner and the means. Now make haste, for we would be gone, seeing that only you detain us." It was a sentence, Lord Aleys felt, and every gurgling word and whistling accent burned deep into his soul. The hair on his neck prickled with terror. He tried to cry out, but he was dumb. His limbs were as lumps of lead. While he struggled with his weakness of body, the figures waited in hideous silence. Lady Helen had been unable to coax sleep to drown her unrest, and had remained seated in the chair by the window. How long she had been there she did not know, but she knew that several hours had passed before the nameless fear in her soul crystallized and awoke her to swift action. She arose to her feet, trembling, her fine nostrils dilated, and her deep brown eyes wide with apprehension. Not knowing why, nor even wondering, she ran to her door, snatched it open, and raced down the hall toward her husband's bedroom. The door there was not locked, so she had no trouble in gaining speedy entrance. On the threshold she halted, as though struck suddenly to stone. The room was empty, save for the form of Lord Aleys, which stood in its exact center. His head was raised, so that his face, expressionless as a sphinx, was presented to the ceiling. In his right hand he grasped an open razor, which he lifted slowly and with inexorable certainty toward his throat. Lady Helen stood transfixed with fright until the glittering blade was about to touch his skin. Then she rushed forward. With one sweep of her arm she dashed the deadly instrument from his hand, so that it bounded clear across the room and was lost in the darkness. With all her strength she shook her husband's body. "Alan! Alan!" she cried hysterically. He opened his eyes, fumbled at his throat, then covered his face with his hands. "God! Helen! Where are you? Oh, I've seen them. They were here." "There has been no one here," she assured him. "You have had a terrible dream, but everything is all right now." "Yes, I've had a most terrible dream," he replied, "but everything is all right now." The next morning she replaced the razor in its cabinet so that Lord Aleys never knew what awful effect the vision had had upon him. And it is said that peace unbroken descended upon Hadley Hall, and that the brothers returned no more, since their pleasure was destroyed and their evil desire had been robbed of its fruits. Thank you so much for hanging out today. My name is Sol, and this is the Pulp Archive. Now, if you had fun, I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, comment, and share. That stuff really helps. And like most stories we cover here, today's was recommended by you. So, if there's a story you'd like to see, send us an email at pulparchivelibrary@gmail.com. we'd love to cover it. If you'd like to support the podcast and keep us going, consider subscribing to our Apple channel or becoming a member on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/pulparchive. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get access to all our podcasts and private explicit episodes that wouldn't be allowed publicly. We feature almost every genre of pulp fiction, horror, detective, western, and even sports. Special thanks to our patrons who make the podcast possible and make every episode of the Pulp Archive happen. Every episode is dedicated to our Patreon members. I truly could not do this without you.